13.
13?
Yeah.
So you were 13 when you made it too, right? I understand you didn't have acting experience beforehand. Is that true?
Yeah.
Imagination.
Well, I had a little bit when I was in church, but I stopped.
Same thing. I'm sure they mounted their own adaptation of Beast of No Nation in the church. I understand from Cary that the casting process involved workshops, acting workshops with like theater games, things like that. Do you remember those theater games?
Yeah.
Abraham's the master of the one-word answer. I challenge you to get more than one.
Do you remember any of those exercises or games that that got to you, that pulled something out of you, or were exciting for you?
Well, yeah. Sometimes we'll be doing some of the scenes that we'll be shooting on set. Like the last scene I was talking to the counselor, I think. Yeah. To the counselor and some welcoming voice.
You saw a lot of these workshops, right, Gary? What did you see in those workshops with Abraham that made you think that he could do Agu?
The challenging part of this role is the changes that Agu has to go through over the course of the story. So from being a much more sort of energetic and mischievous young man, to the shock of losing a family, to being alone and scared, to suddenly being captured and trained and indoctrinated, and then learning to become a killer, and then the effects of that on him, and then eventually escaping that and living with all those experiences. Those are a lot of shades of experience, and I think for me in the casting process, what I was looking for was, as we try these exercises out, which are sort of emotional parallels to what we'd be doing in the actual shoot for the film, who is portraying this character the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Not authentically, but believably. And Abraham always went into these scenes and these exercises with a present tenseness. You can see in his eyes the wheels sort of turning in every sort of moment that other kids weren't necessarily doing. You know, they could fake the emotion, but they weren't necessarily living the moment. And Abraham was able to separate his own experience and somehow live in that imaginary space.
Speaking of that, your character Agu goes through some really rough stuff. Was it difficult for you to imagine what that might be like to go through? How did you get there?
Well, sometimes I do realize I was with Cary what we are going to shoot, so it was a little bit hard for me to do that. But I didn't think about anything. What I was just thinking about is just acting. I didn't imagine anything.
Just thinking about that.
Was there a scene or a sequence for Abraham that you were worried that he might have trouble achieving?
Well, Abraham's like, he can be playful, but you're also pretty serious. And like the role you play actually in the beginning, the boy of Agu in his home village, is very different from who you are. Like Abraham, you know, like he's the quiet observer. He's not like the orchestrator. You know what I mean? So it was, for me, I was curious to see like, could he be like that young leader who's like instigating this idea of the television, directing these kids to like play the imagination TV parts and sort of be actually more than anything be a door-to-door salesman. And so that was interesting to see. That was actually the first thing we shot. But I think he did it just fine. So I think one of the more challenging scenes that we did probably was when you're captured by Idris the first time. No, that was you too.
Yeah, well, that was a little bit hard because, That was a little bit hard because that was my first scene with Idris, and I was like, oh, I'm afraid of this guy.
And you're afraid of the animals.
Yeah.
I made him walk. We checked to make sure the path didn't have any like dangerous snakes on it, but I didn't tell him that before we walked down.
But it was crazy too because like you guys were far from me, so if I saw an animal coming close to me, that animal is gonna eat me before you guys will.
Good acting.
You mentioned Idris. He's not bad. Did he take on a leadership role in the company?
Yeah, absolutely. The first day he got to meet his battalion, he didn't know that we had them all set up for him. He came to visit the NDF camp, and he thought I brought him there under the auspices that, you know, here, come see like where your camp is. Let's go pick a place where you'll kind of deliver your sermons from. And he knew that they were doing exercises there for the boot camp, but he didn't know that they were in battalion formation waiting for him. So he showed up, you may remember this day, and everyone was lined up in battalion formation with like call outs and that, like, you know, when the 2IC would say like, how the commander look, all right, sir, all that stuff. It's loud on speakers in a theater, but it's even louder in person. So it's a very powerful, almost church-like experience. And I was really looking forward to seeing how Idris responded to seeing 300 guys that were waiting for their general, essentially. And it was great to see him sort of own it. You know, he was taken aback for a second. I knew it. I was watching him. 'Cause I knew it would. I mean, with anyone who shows up to 300 people yelling out their name. But like a surprise party, I guess. An armed surprise party. But then he started walking through the lines and like meeting his men, and kind of like just he knew what we were doing to him. I think he got wise really quick and then just owned it. And it kind of like that the rest of the film. I think he tried to make friends with Abraham. Abraham was playing the cool kid, you know. And maybe you were being shy, but he was keeping his distance from Idris in the beginning. And I think that scene was really the first time they interacted.
Did you feel like you developed a rapport with Idris, and were you able to communicate with him and learn from him during the shoot?
Well, I learned a lot from him, but I still remember one, like, when we are not shooting, he'll be reading the script, so on camera, he'll be memorizing it, like, he's just saying it from his head, not like he read it from a book.
And, no, just kidding. Just a kid one day. I was satiated on this film. It was like being the coach of like a little league team. A really loud, not follow the rule, sort of long bus trip with a little league team. And sometimes you had to talk louder than them because they would all be screaming, which meant yelling. But the kids, it was a lot of love though too, because everyone kind of like hung out in the same hotel. Everyone was always together. So I wasn't necessarily their friend, but I also wasn't necessarily their boss. It was like something in between, more like a big brother. I could boss them around, but then I could also be cool with them. That casting process, Harrison Nesbitt saw over 2,000 kids, and out of those 2,000 kids, about 30 of them were the ones we brought to this sort of intensive theater workshop with Zoe. Zoe's in the room here somewhere. Hey Zoe. Zoe ran a theater workshop in Ghana before we made the movie, so when I found her, like, you're gonna come stay with us and we're not gonna let you go. And she workshopped the kids all the way through, almost all the way through production. He left like 2 or 3 weeks before the end. She would run a lot of exercises and things like that. But out of those kids were already really charismatic, interesting kids to begin with. They were selected, highly selected, and we knew that was it. You know, we're gonna have to cast our Agu out of this, our Striker out of this, our Hope, our Preacher, all the other sort of like roles within the small boy unit, and we did a lot of sort of just improvisations, living in the moment. You know, you have tasks. Everyone has their tasks. You're allowed to interact, You're not allowed to look at the camera. Just things like that, just to get them used to like the process of filmmaking. So that then when we did the scenes, they knew what they could do and they couldn't do. And it was pretty free in some ways, and then other ways it wouldn't interrupt the reality that we were trying to create on camera.
He was not my friend on set, but on camera, you think he was my friend. Yeah. Well, we used to fight a lot in the hotel.
They wouldn't even talk to each other on set. It was like Mad
Unless
Max.
on camera, before you see that, we are acting, but on camera, if you are not on camera, you see that.
This is why he deserves an award, because you'd think he loves him. Undergrad. So when I applied to film school at NYU in 2001, my treatment was about a child soldier project. So that's almost 15 years ago now. And Beasts of No Nation was a book that was given to me after having done research for a couple of years, as well as research in Sierra Leone and Liberia on the subject. It was a book that was just given to me by a friend who thought I might be interested in it, as sort of analogous to what I was doing. And when I read the book, I just felt that there was so much in there that I could adapt and put on the screen, and especially for my research, infuse into as essentially just a voiceover sort of internal monologue, but add all the textures around it as well. And it provided a structure to hang the story on. I got really lucky because in 2006, so exactly 10 years ago, I walked into the Focus Features office. I was still actually reading Beast of No Nation for the second time, and an executive in the office saw me with the book in my hand and said, "I love that book. I want to make that into a movie." And I said, "That's great. I want to make this into a movie too." And then I walked in the office because I was there to pitch Sin Nombre to them, and they ended up optioning Sin Nombre and optioning the book for me. So then Focus was the one that sort of hired me to adapt the script initially. Ultimately, they didn't make the movie because, as we found with many other sort of producers afterwards, it for the amount it cost to make the film, by any normal math, you'll never make the money back. A movie like a $6 million movie like that could probably expect maybe a $1.5 million domestic box office return, and then maybe 2/3 of that more in international. So it'd essentially be a loss. So they dropped the film. And in 2011, Amy Kaufman and I, who produced Sin Nombre with me, we got the movie back from Focus, and we were able to shop it around, and Red Crown agreed to finance it. But it still took another, I would say, 3 years to get everything in order, to get Idris on board, and the budget at that point got reduced far lower than I thought was even possible to make it for. It was below $4 million at that point. And by the time I got to Ghana, it was back up again because it's just impossible to make this film for less than $5 million. It was a long process, and as we were making it, and every day as we were having, it was a nearly impossible shoot. Every day, every film has problems, but this film had a lot of problems. I think it's because it's a war film, because it was kids, because we're in Ghana, where the last major production there was Herzog, and Herzog never makes easy films, so that's a bad early example. It felt like the movie was just never going to get finished, and I'm amazed that we did finish it, and we barely finished it. I think I've now gone beyond